I noticed the first change on a Tuesday, the kind of Portland morning that wears a lid of wet clouds and aches for coffee. My phone woke me before my alarm because my calendar had shifted. Two meetings stacked on top of each other, a reminder to call my mother that I never set, and a dinner reservation I didn't make at a restaurant I couldn't afford. The screen throbbed with dots and color, full of a life I didn't recognize but was apparently living. I dismissed the alerts and felt that tiny pressure behind the ribs that comes when your own routine looks back at you like a stranger. I live by routine. I'm 27, a UX researcher at a small healthcare startup that makes patient portals tolerable. My days are interviews, prototypes, and notes with timestamps. Each box on my calendar, a door I know how to open. But the doors that morning were wrong. Same hallway, unfamiliar keys. I told myself it was a sync issue, a cloud burp. I unsynced and resynced, rebooted, watched the dots reappear. The dinner reservation for Friday at Matsu had a name attached to it, 4M. Only, no, not a name, a letter. My initial, a wink from the app itself. I looked at the screenshot icon pulsing in my head, that old habit of documenting anomalies. I took one, then another, and sent both to my personal email with the subject line, "Something's off." At work, I kept catching the sensation you get when a camera is somewhere behind you and your skin decides to be the lens. My laptop hummed with files I knew and files I didn't. A folder called archive_old resume I had never created. A draft email to my ex, unsent, mercifully, apologizing for things I wasn't sorry about. The body text ended mid-sentence, like a hand had been lifted. The second change happened that night. A direct message on a social network I barely use, a freshly made account with a name that felt more like breath than words. Quiet neighbor. No avatar, just a default silhouette. "You're overworked. You need a night out. Friday is good." I should have blocked them. I didn't. I replied with the barest thing I allow strangers. "Who are you?" The typing dots appeared, stopped, appeared again. "A friend. Someone who wants you to have what you deserve." I closed the app and threw my phone onto the couch like distance could scare the words into silence. It didn't. The reservation remained. So did the calendar. I told myself not to go. By Wednesday night, my mother texted about a hospital bill I didn't know existed. And just like that, the third change opened my door. Because if there's one thing you learn growing up with a mother who makes casserole stretch a pasta week, it's that money is a quietly ticking timer disguised as a budget. I texted her back, then sat in the dark and thought about how exactly someone else might know the rhythms of my life better than I did. If Friday was a trap, I planned to step in with the light on. I didn't know yet that the door I was walking through was one I locked every night myself, and that the person who had the key had copied it a long time ago. I didn't know that the word friend would become a tool. I didn't know whose hands were on the tool. I only knew this. Someone had found a way into the story I told myself about myself, and they were already editing the plot. The question I couldn't shake was simple and immediate. What else would they change next? I moved to Portland after college because it seemed gentle. Rain has a way of forgiving the edges of things, and I needed forgiving. My first serious boyfriend cheated during finals week, and I did the thing I'm best at. I made a plan. I left. I built a new routine. I found a tiny studio in a building that had the good kind of old smell, paper and laundry, and I met people whose names aligned into the stable constellation of a life. One of those was Evan. We met at a neighborhood cleanup the first spring I lived here, both picking cigarette butts out of a curb that kept coughing them back. He was the kind of friend who knows the good coffee shops and the names of dogs at the park, who answers texts with memes and asks real questions when he notices your silence. He worked in IT support at the university, helped us stuff, system tickets, the unglamorous kind of competence that greases cities. Our friendship was easy, then steady. If the week was a room, Evan was the window that opened. Sometimes we were almost something else. There were nights when the air between us felt like it had a switch we could flip. We didn't. I told myself that was maturity, not fear. I dated other people. He did too, though badly. Our rhythm held. My job asks me to design with empathy, to walk into other people's mental rooms and understand the furniture. I am good at it because I like how stories work. Patterns are the heartbeats. You look for pain points, you test. You tweak, you watch the dials move. I had a private blog I never shared, experiments in making my own day smoother. Sleep at 10, run 3 days a week, meal prep on Sundays, check finances on the first. I liked proving to myself that a person is a system you can tend. Maybe that's why I didn't see the risk right away. When control is your religion, any anomaly can look like a confession from the universe rather than a test. I assumed the calendar glitch was just a glitch, and the anonymous message was a bored troll, and both would fade if I ignored them. The bill my mother mentioned snagged me, though. The surgery she had last year was supposed to be covered. She hates asking for help, which means asking is a flare gun over the trees. If a stranger could nudge me toward a night out, what could they do with something heavier? There's a part of me that hoards secrets like rationed sugar. My father isn't in the picture. He left in a way that turned my mother into a magician of quiet endurance. Every time a man lied to me afterward, it satisfied a prophecy I never wanted to be writing. So I grew careful. I learned passwords with symbols and phrasing that only meant something to me. I planned in notes I kept offline. I thought I was a fortress because the drawbridge pulled up clean. Then, Friday arrived, with its sleek reservation and a feeling that I was being graded on a test I didn't know I'd sat for. I told no one I was going. I wore the blue dress I saved for interviews because I wanted to feel like my sharpest version in case I had to cut through the night quickly. On my way out, I unplugged my router like I could unplug the questions too. A man at the bar looked up when I arrived. Mid-30s, wool jacket, a face that would vanish in a crowd. Not him. A couple clinked a celebratory drink. A woman took a selfie with her friend. I asked the host for the reservation for M. He smiled. "Window table," he said, as if he'd been waiting for me to say I was me. There was a note on the table, folded into a clean square. My initial on the outside again. Inside, "You don't treat yourself enough. Try the miso black cod. It'll remind you to say yes to yourself." The handwriting was neat and angled and hummed with a confidence that irritated me. I scanned the room. No one looked up. No one smiled the wrong way. I should have walked out. I stayed because some part of me wanted to prove to the invisible that I could be visible without folding. The cod was perfect. For dessert, the server set down a small plate I didn't order. Dark chocolate, raspberries, a smear of something like silk. He said, "Compliments of a friend." I took the first bite and tasted the shape of a trap and something worse, care. When the bill came, there wasn't one. The server placed a second folded square instead. It said, "We're even." Below that, smaller, "For now." I went home and plugged the router back in and opened every app I owned, each one a door for a possible hand. Nothing obvious. No new followers, no new DMs. Except one more message from Quiet Neighbor, arriving the moment I sighed, like they'd been waiting for me to sit down. "Did you like it?" I typed back before I could stop myself. "What do you want?" "You safe? You rested? You happy? You, finally, with someone who deserves you." Who is that? Someone who knows how you think. The room seemed to tilt. I thought about Evan's patience, the way he listens all the way to the end before he says anything. I hated that my brain went to his name because my brain knows the shape of my life and it always puts Evan where the good things go. I locked my phone. I put it face down. I lay awake and told myself every door in my life was shut. I lay awake and wondered which ones had never been. The hook tightened. If a friend was doing this, what did friend mean anymore? On Monday, my work account locked me out. 3 failed attempts and my access was sealed. I walked across the office to IT with that strange theater of pretending everything is normal in front of normal people. And a guy named Trevor who wears hoodies year-round reset my password. "Looks like some weird behavior over the weekend," he said, without looking at me. "What kind of behavior?" "Multiple IPs, lots of retries." He shrugged. "Happens." "Doesn't happen to me." I went back to my desk, changed my passwords everywhere, and enabled 2-factor authentication on anything that didn't already have it. I downloaded an authenticator app. I texted Evan because that's what I always do when the practical universe demands a calm adult. He wrote back, "You want me to swing by later and help lock it all down?" "I've got it, I think, but thanks." "You sure?" "Yeah, rain check. Always." I believed him because he has never given me a reason not to. Then my personal email dinged. A message from my bank, a new device signed in. I raced through the steps to verify it was me, except it wasn't. I saw the location, my neighborhood, but not my address, a block away. I reported it and the bank locked the account in a tidy sequence of screens that made me want to hug a designer somewhere. I walked the block in a circle like my body could triangulate the intrusion in space, as if the person would stand up from a cafe table with my password stamped across his forehead. I circled, and the sky spat a lazy rain that felt like breath. Portland was itself. I was not. The next DM arrived while I was still damp from the walk. "I fixed the bank thing." "You're welcome." "You caused the bank thing. If I wanted your money, you wouldn't be writing this." "What do you want?" "For your life to move in the right direction. It's been stuck. I'm unsticking it." There are words that sound generous and are actually clamps. Unsticking is one of them. The more I thought about who might say it with that clip certainty, the more my brain edited names out of the list until only one remained. I hated that it was Evan. I went to his apartment because I needed to see his face in the same room as mine. He lives in a building with a hallway that always smells like curry and dryer sheets, which is basically what comfort smells like. He opened the door wearing a t-shirt with a joke about semicolons on it, and his hair was damp in a way that made the air between us catch for a second. He smiled and then saw something on my face and sobered like a switch. "Are you okay?" "Someone's messing with my stuff," I said, and heard the childishness of the word stuff and used it anyway because the alternative was to catalog the exact shape of my fear. We sat on his couch. He watched while I listed the changes, the reservation, the DM, the calendar, the bank. He asked good questions in the patient rhythm of a tech who solves people more than he solves machines. He asked what passwords I'd used, whether I reused them. No. If anyone had my phone? No. If I clicked any weird links? I didn't think so. He suggested I freeze my credit, not because he thought this was identity theft, but because it was smart. He told me he was there for whatever I needed. He didn't reach for me. He didn't look away. I wanted to believe he wasn't involved. I wanted that more than I wanted anything. But part of caring for patterns is admitting when one is pointing somewhere you don't want to go. When I left, he hugged me in the doorway. His arms felt like a wall I could lean on. He said, "Text me if anything else happens," and I heard the emphasis like a small nail being tapped into a wall. Else. It happened the next morning. My Instagram had new saved posts. Rings, small apartments in Madrid, articles about living abroad as a couple. My work Slack had a new private channel called Horizon Move, with only me invited, containing a single pinned note. "Sometimes the right life is a flight away." The person who made it knew how to set a hook so clean you didn't feel the point. They knew my tone. They knew the way I named things, short, lowercase, a little poetic, like a label that also shrugs. I deleted the channel. A minute later, another appeared. Horizon Move 2. I deleted it too. The third was Horizon Stay. You like Portland. You like the rain. You like people who remember dog names. You would miss it. Life is data. Data says you stay, but choose differently inside the staying. It felt like an apology written in my own pen. I wanted to cry from how precisely the words fit. I wanted to scream at the violation of that precision. I did neither. I printed the message and tucked it into the notebook where I keep my most private designs, the ones about myself. I stared at the pinned note until the sheet of paper felt like a person in the room. The inflection point was the file on my desktop that afternoon. Mom_debt_notes. It was a spreadsheet with entries I didn't make, accounts, balances, due dates, and a plan outlined in neat, color-coded cells. The plan was doable. It moved money from places I'd been lazy about moving it from. It would work. Not even my mother knew the full extent of those bills. Only I did. I knew then that whoever had done this wasn't just in my apps. They were in the corners of my life I never let people touch. If the word for entering without permission is breaking and entering, then this was a breaking where nothing cracked, but everything was suddenly open. The last row of the spreadsheet was a note. You take care of everyone else. Let me take care of you. Dash Q. I closed the laptop like you close a conversation you can't win. The rain started again, soft like something practicing being louder. I watched it cling to the glass and knew the simple truth I'd been walking around. I wasn't safe. The mini gack was simple and sharp. If the person guiding me believed they were helping, what would they do if I resisted? The control I prize has a cousin named recklessness. It visits when control fails. I printed the spreadsheet and the DMs and the calendar screenshots, and I drove them to the police station like paper could make the intangible solid. The officer who took my report had a practiced voice that made me feel both silly and seen. Save everything, she said. Don't engage. Strengthen your security. If One moves, call us. I asked about protection orders, about anonymity, about the fact that my stalker, because that word now fits whether I wanted it to or not, was more careful than cruel. She nodded in that way people nod when they are not allowed to make promises. Document, she said. I went home and documented. I set up a fresh laptop with a new Apple ID and password spun from nonsense and pain. I separated accounts across devices. I got a second phone number through a service. I turned on logging where I could. I watched the lines of my own paranoia form a shape that looked like a decent plan. When you design user flows, you learn the friction points, the places where a person will quit if you don't guide them. My plan added friction everywhere. I made my life an obstacle course for a person I couldn't see. Quiet neighbor noticed. That night. You're making this harder. Good. I'm trying to help. You're acting like I'm hurting you. You are hurting me. You won't say that after Friday. What happens Friday? You'll see. There's a particular kind of threat that wears a mask called surprise. It felt like a calendar invite I hadn't accepted. I marked Friday with an X in my paper planner and circled it until the paper thinned. I considered not leaving my apartment at all. Then I remembered I didn't have to be the only person in the room when Friday arrived. I texted Evan. Movie night. Friday? Distract me? Done. I'll bring popcorn. Just seeing the bubbles of his reply slowed my pulse. If the stalker was Evan, inviting him over felt like pinning a snake to the table to identify the pattern on its back. If he wasn't, I'd have a person who knows the shape of my panic sitting on my couch while the unknown tried to make a move. Friday came in hard and gray. Work blurred by. I answered questions about usability metrics while counting minutes. I went home and checked every window latch twice. When Evan knocked, I felt the normalcy roll in like a scent. He filled my kitchen with butter and salt, and we watched a movie from the 90s that has aged badly in all the ways that now feel educational. We laughed, we groaned, we compared mental TBR lists. I watched his face during the quiet parts and tried to see malice. I couldn't. He looked like the person who has been in my photos for 5 years. The same crooked tooth peeking when he really smiles, the same careful way he sets a glass down. At 9:14 p.m., my phone buzzed. A calendar alert. Now. No title, no location, just now. Evan looked at my face. Everything okay? Just a work thing, I said too quickly. He paused the movie and studied me with that soft concentration he uses when the spreadsheet won't balance. Do you want to talk about it? I shook my head. If he was the person behind the alerts, he already knew. If he wasn't, I didn't want to drag him into the gravity of it. My other phone, the second number, buzzed too. I hadn't given that number to anyone yet, not even him. I excused myself to the bathroom and looked at the screen. Unknown number. Open your front door. I didn't. I looked through the peephole and saw nothing but the vague fish eye of the empty hall. The phone vibrated again. It's a gift. I lifted the chain and cracked the door. A small box sat on the floor like a patient animal. It was the exact brand of running shoes I always buy, the model updated to the current year, the color I would have chosen. I brought it inside and put it on the table like it might be wired to a lesson. Inside the shoe box was another note.
You run to clear your head when you're scared. Run tomorrow, Terwilliger at 8 a.m. I'll keep you safe. Behind me, Evan said, "New shoes?" I closed the box too fast. "Early birthday present," I lied. He nodded and turned back to the couch. I stood in the kitchen with the note burning the air and understood with cold clarity. Whoever this was, they watched. Maybe not from outside my window, but from the angles of my day. They had opinions about those angles. They thought gifts absolved surveillance. I didn't sleep. At 7:30 a.m., I laced the shoes and told myself to own the ground. Terwilliger Boulevard cuts above the city in a curve of green, a ridge where runners go to feel held by trees. The path offered line of sight and witnesses and an exit at every mile. I started at a pace meant to signal to anyone tracking me that I was not afraid, which is how you run when you're lying to yourself on purpose. At mile 2, a cyclist passed me and glanced over like he might say something. He didn't. At mile 3, my phone pinged. I didn't look. At mile 4, the ping came again. I slowed and checked. "You look strong." The time step matched the exact moment I felt my breath catch and then find itself again, the leverage point of a run. I scanned the trees and saw only leaves. I ran home faster than I've ever run. If someone could see me on the ridge, they could follow me back to my door. I locked it behind me and leaned against it, and laughed. The short, sharp sound your body makes when there are only bad choices left and you're choosing to breathe. The hook into the next turn sharpened. If gifts and guidance didn't get me to obey, what would the friend do to tighten the reins? On Monday, my manager asked if I had considered moving to our New York office for a year. She said it like a question. It felt like a script. I asked why. She said there was an initiative spinning up and my name came up repeatedly. I asked by whom. She named a VP I barely knew. I smiled and said, "I'll think about it," because that's what competent people say when the ground beneath them slides. In my inbox, a message from that VP arrived a minute later, as if the conversation had triggered an automation. "Would love to chat. Saw your work on patient onboarding. Could use that thinking here." Attached were documents with my name in the metadata even though I hadn't touched them. The files proposed a research plan I would have written and a staffing chart that gave me control I would have wanted. It was so flattering I felt the outline of a trap, again. The last page ended with a flourish. "She's discreet, driven, and available." Available? I checked my calendar and saw 3 events I never created that blocked out the next 2 months in a pattern that looked like exit ramps from my current life. Apartment notice, storage quotes, flight research. Whoever was in my life had shifted into a new gear, not just nudging, steering. That evening, a message from quiet neighbor. "This is the change you've needed. You'll thank me when you're thriving. You'll be with someone who finally matches you." Who? Me. The directness stunned me. It was the confident confession of a man who had already constructed the future and was handing me my part like a cue card. Rage arrived clean and welcome. It cut through the fog like a siren. "If you know me at all, you know I decide my life, not you. You've always chosen the wrong men. I won't let you choose wrong again. You don't get to let me or not let me. I do now." I took screenshots and saved them in 3 places. Then I opened the Photos app and scrolled years back to find the shot of Evan and me holding plastic trophies from a trivia night we won. It wasn't evidence of anything except a history that had felt safe, almost safe, and now looked like potential front row seats to a crime committed with a smile. I called a cybersecurity consultant. My savings flinched at the cost, my spine didn't. She came Tuesday and sat at my kitchen table and explained the angles like a surgeon talking through a procedure. "This is intimate access," she said. "Either someone got physical access to one of your devices at some point, or you have reused credentials somewhere that mattered. But the level of specificity," she tapped the spreadsheet about my mother with her pen, "that's someone who studies you, someone who knows your language." She installed software, gave me a crash course in logging, helped me partition my life like a house with doors that don't line up anymore. She set up a honeypot, a decoy email account, a decoy calendar, a decoy folder of personal letters that would chatter loud if touched. She showed me how we'd see the fingerprints, not just the hand. "Who do you suspect?" she asked. I said the name like I was admitting a debt. "Evan." "Why?" "Because he's the one who could call himself a friend and still think he knows what I need more than I do." She nodded without judgment. "If it's him, we'll know. If it's not, we'll still know." Wednesday night, the honeypot sang. Someone logged into the decoy email from a device labeled Pixel 7 Pro. The IP mirrored to a neighborhood 8 blocks from mine. The first thing they opened was the folder labeled Letters I Never Sent, which was bait written in my voice. They spent 12 minutes there, scrolling. They created a rule to forward new messages to an address that anonymized itself, but we traced the first bounce, a university network. I texted Evan, "Coffee tomorrow, need your brain." He replied like he always does. Always. I slept badly. I dreamed of locks with smiles on them, like they were happy to be picked. At coffee, I watched his hands. He told me about a student who wrote his password on a sticky note on his monitor and then blamed the machine when someone used it. He laughed and then saw my face. "Sorry, not funny." "It's fine." And it was almost true, because the laugh was soft and the guilt was immediate. I asked him if he loved his job. He said he liked helping people not be afraid of their machines. The word afraid made something move behind my ribs again. Do you ever feel like you know the people you help better than they know themselves? He looked at me like the question was a door and he was deciding if he wanted to know what was on the other side. He said, "Sometimes. But that's not a license." We walked to my car. He hugged me tight, longer than usual. I could hear his heart as a dull human drum. When we pulled apart, his eyes were wet. I could have decided right there to be wrong about him. Love is a shapeshifter. It can dress as doubt or mercy. But when I got home, the decoy calendar had a new event. Dinner Friday for M. The restaurant was different. The work was the same. The log put the edit at 10:37 a.m., the exact minute Evan excused himself to use the bathroom at the cafe. The hook for the next turn was not subtle. It didn't need to be. I would set a trap that left no room for story.
The consultant, whose name was Nisha, sat with me like a co-author. "We bait the behavior you've already seen," she said. "We give the friend a choice that reveals the hand completely." We built a narrative designed as a mirror. I created a new document in my decoy drive titled Real Plan, Leaving Portland. In it, I wrote a detailed account of a job offer in Seattle. Names slightly wrong, schedule tight, logistics messy. I left a draft of a text to Evan saying I needed space, that I was moving, that I couldn't do our friendship right now. It hurt like practice for pain. The doc included access codes to a storage space that didn't exist and a list of logistics that could be interfered with in ways a caring stalker would not be able to resist. Movers booked for Friday, landlord notice to be delivered Thursday, flights for Sunday. Nisha made sure the file looked live. We let it sit. We watched. By morning, the file had been copied into a folder the stalker had named Protect, as if language could dress interference in love. They canceled the imaginary movers. They composed but didn't send an email to my manager saying I was considering a leave for mental health reasons. They changed the flight to a later date. They added a calendar event called Evan Talk with a note, "She'll come around if she breathes." The device fingerprint matched the pixel. The IP was the university's. The login occurred between 11:40 and 12:05, Evan's lunch hour. My stomach was a small, hard stone in a bowl of acid. Nisha looked at me like people look at candles they don't want to blow out. "You wanted to know," she said. "Now you know." Knowing is not the same as believing. Believing requires the moment when the story finally clicks, and the click echoes against the old hopes long enough to dull them. I invited Evan over for pasta. I cooked the sauce the way he likes it, spicy enough that you notice it. We ate and used words to fence the air between us. When he set his plate down, he said my name like a prayer or a warning. "You could do better than here," he said. "You could do better than the people you've chosen." "Which people?" He lifted his hands and then rested them back on his knees. "You know." "I don't." He tilted his head. "You do." The pronouns in that room were traps. Friend, you, we.
Each could be bait. I didn't step. I offered him dessert and watched him scrape the bowl with his spoon like the sweet could make anything gentler. When he left, I locked the door with shaking hands. The decoy email chimed, a message from quiet neighbor, as if he couldn't help himself now that the rhythm was set. I made some adjustments to your plan. Don't worry, you'll be okay. You just need help choosing. You always have. Evan, stop. Silence. Then, I would never hurt you. I've been protecting you since day one. Remember when your ex showed up at that trivia night? Who handled it? Remember when we walked you home after the bar? Who checked behind you every time? I have a right to make sure you're okay. There it was. The part of the story that made sense to the person telling it. I saved the messages. I sent them to Nisha. I sent them to myself. My hands were steady, which is how I knew the fear had cooled into strategy. The hook for the spiral was a decision. I would stop playing defense.
I made my real calendar an empty house with lights on. I went to work, came home, and let my phone sit in plain view. I cooked, ran, washed dishes, slept. I let the decoy accounts look busy. In them, I talked to a fake landlord, to fake movers, to a fake friend named Kara who stood in for the people I wasn't letting in. Meanwhile, I filed for a protective order with a police report and the logs as evidence. Nisha referred me to an attorney who specialized in cyberstalking. He had kind eyes and the vocabulary of a person who was named this monster often enough to take its teeth. He explained the process, the thresholds, the ways the law sometimes asks for blood before it believes bruises. He told me what to do if Evan escalated, where to go, what to say, how to say it without the wobble panic loves. I was scared in the flat way that lives under the tongue, but fear can be a metronome. It kept me steady. It taught me the tempo of the week. Evan texted me in normal friendship ways. Memes, a photo of a dog in a sweater that normally would have nodded the day. How are you? Do you need anything? I replied in normal friendship ways. Fine, busy. Catch up soon. I didn't give him anything with sharp edges that he could turn into a tool. Quiet neighbor, meanwhile, ramped. The messages were more direct, more possessive, then suddenly tender, then declarative again. The oscillation made me want to wash my hands. You belong with someone who understands you. You have no idea what I prevented this week. Say you need me. You don't have to be strong. I can be strong for you. Why are you making me the bad guy when I've given you everything? It's easy to miss the violence if you only read the sentences and not the verb at the center. Take. He took my choices and covered them in velvet. He took my boundaries and named them worries. He took my privacy and called it intimacy. On Thursday, an envelope slid under my door. My name on the outside, the slanted neatness that had become a scar. Inside, a photograph of me taken through my window, my back to the glass, my head bent over my laptop. It was grainy and close. On the back, you hunch when you're thinking too hard. Sit up, breathe. I didn't call the police. I drove to the university. I sat in the parking lot and watched people walk in and out of the help desk building. Students with lanyards and lives too big for their backpacks. I saw Evan at 5:02 p.m., shrugging on a jacket and squinting at the sky, the way we all do here, to gauge if the rain is a promise or a threat. I didn't follow him. I went home and closed the curtains and sat with my anger until it sharpened into a tool I could hold. I wrote a letter to Evan, not the decoy kind, the real kind. I told him I knew, and I told him what I had, and I told him exactly what would happen if he didn't stop. I told him I would give him one chance to tell me the truth in person. I told him the time and the place. Saturday, noon, Laurelhurst Park, the bench near the pond where the ducks pretend they own everything. Public enough to feel safe, exposed enough to make lying expensive.
I printed the letter and slid it under his door. Then I waited. The hook into revelation was the sound of someone removing a mask.
Saturday was bright in that brief way that tricks Portlanders into optimism. Families fed crumbs to birds, runners looped the paths, a man in a faded blazer's cap taught a toddler to ride a balance bike. I sat on the bench and watched my breath cloud and vanish. Noon came. Evan stood in front of me at 12:03. He looked like the person I knew and also like a person who had slept badly. He sat without asking. We let three ducks conduct a small drama at our feet to give us the space to arrange words. "I know it's you," I said. I kept my voice flat because flat is where knives don't catch. He didn't pretend not to understand. He looked at the pond, then at me, his eyes raw. "I didn't mean for it to be like this." "How did you mean for it to be?" "I meant to help. I meant to keep you safe from," he gestured at the air, "from the people who don't know you, from the men who use you, from yourself. I don't need protection from myself." He flinched, like the sentence hit a fresh bruise. "You choose small," he said quietly. "You take care of everyone, and you never let anyone take care of you. I thought if I cleared the noise, you'd see." "See what?" "Me." There it was, the whole script packed into 2 letters. I felt like I was listening to a person describe a movie I hadn't agreed to be in. "So you set reservations and moved my calendar and changed my flights and watched me through my window. I made sure you ate and slept and didn't make panic choices. I made sure you didn't run back to someone who hurt you. I asked you to run in a place where I could watch, to make sure no one followed you. I—" His voice broke. "I love you." He said it like a person says a password they think will unlock everything. Love doesn't take. Love asks. He closed his eyes. The sunlight through the branches made patterns on his face like a signal. "I didn't want to scare you. But you did. I wanted us to start right. You started by lying." He opened his eyes, and the look there was something like shock because he had written the story so cleanly in his head that my lines didn't match his script. "I had to at first. You would have said no if I asked to help. You always say no when help is for you." "You mean I had boundaries?" "You mean you have walls." The argument was precise and he had rehearsed it. That made it easier to step around. "I have evidence. I have logs. I have messages. I have the IPs. I have the photo you took of me in my apartment. I have the notes you left at restaurants with my initial like you owned it. I filed for a protective order. If you don't stop, if you don't delete everything, if you ever touch my accounts again, I will involve the police, the university, and whoever else I need to." He swallowed. His jaw moved like he was counting the cost in his teeth. "You would do that to me?" "You did this to yourself," I said. He nodded then once, the way people nod at verdicts. "I never wanted to be a bad guy," he said. "You wanted to be God." He winced, which told me the aim was true. He stood. "I'll stop," he said. "I'll delete everything." "Now," I said. He blinked. "Okay." We walked to his apartment because I knew myself. I would not be able to breathe until the windows were opened and the hard drives clicked and the accounts showed their empty rooms. He let me in. He sat at his desk and logged into dashboards and drives and places I hadn't even thought to look. He deleted rules and accounts and folders named things like Protect and Future and once Shepherd, which made me want to break a plate. He opened his phone to show me the authenticator apps, the saved devices, the logins. He deleted the anonymous account. He typed until the silence felt full of the small deaths of little gods. When he finished, he turned the phone around like a child showing a drawing. "It's done," he said. I turned to go. He reached out and then stopped his hand mid-air like he hit a wall he could finally see. "Please don't hate me." "I don't," I said, surprised at the truth. "But I don't trust you, and I don't want you in my life." He nodded,
like nodding was all that was left. I left. On the sidewalk, I let my knees bend a little, as if the ground was allowing it, as if gravity had been holding its breath with me and could finally exhale. The hook into the endgame was obvious and unwelcome. People don't give up power cleanly after they've convinced themselves it's love.
Nisha told me to assume the deletion was partial. People who build systems to control other people rarely destroy them all in one afternoon, she said. Hope for the best, plan for the rest. We changed everything again. New phone, new number, new router, new locks. I updated my building with photos and a note. Do not let this person in. I added a camera to my hallway. I moved my desk so the window caught my profile as easily. I taught my body new paths inside my apartment, like a choreographer reblocking a show after a set change. I sent the logs and messages to the university through their reporting system, attaching the protective order petition. I wrote a letter to HR at my company with just the facts and no adjectives, which felt like a test of how cleanly I could tell a story that held a tremor. I texted the 3 closest people in my life and told them enough. I'm okay, I wrote, but I need you to ignore anything that sounds like me asking for help by text that isn't this number, and I need you to trust me if I cancel plans without explanation. They didn't ask questions that made me do emotional labor. They said yes, and they sent photos of pets and sky and silly things that made the day widen again. For myself, I wrote a plan with steps that ended in a horizon not defined by a man's desire. The plan included therapy, because the way through is not stronger passwords alone. It included running in places with people. It included saying yes to small, safe pleasures. It included a new job, mine here, where I could ask for more without leaving as a form of escape. I thought that would be the end game. I thought the last section would be a neat denouement with a tidy moral about autonomy. Then, a week later, an email landed in my work inbox from a student account at the university. I heard you hurt Evan. He's a good person. Maybe stop telling lies. Then another. He was only trying to help. You women always say you want a good guy. Then, watch your back. The subject lines escalated in a pattern that was almost textbook. There were 4, then 16, then 100, the senders multiplying with the ease of a forwarded link, and a grievance wearing the clothes of romance. My stomach slid down a notch. It wasn't just Evan anymore. It was a chorus. The hook into the confrontation was thick with noise. When a story goes public, truth has to get louder or smarter, preferably both. I met with the university's Title IX and IT security teams in a room that smelled like new carpet and old coffee. I told them what I had. I told them what now existed because a man had confused surveillance with care. Nisha came with me. She spoke fluent machine and fluent human. The IT director, a woman with the posture of someone who spends her life asking networks to behave, nodded in all the right places. We'll handle our side, she said. I'm sorry this happened to you. HR at my company added their own calm sentences. We will support your safety. We will cooperate with law enforcement. We will restrict access. The words built a scaffolding around the fear so it didn't have to hold itself up. The protective order moved forward. A judge signed it with a pen that turned my private evidence into public weight. Paper isn't justice, but it is leverage. Evan emailed me from his personal account to apologize. It was long and careful and full of phrases engineered to sound contrite. Crossed boundaries, lost perspective, got carried away, never intended harm, love made me foolish. He asked to meet to apologize in person. I didn't respond. Nisha reminded me that meeting would only give him new data. How I looked now, how I sounded when saying no. She was right. I blocked the address. The messages from students cooled when the university issued a statement to their networks about harassment and the consequences for participating. A few sent apologies, most didn't. It didn't matter.
The noise fell below the threshold where it stops being danger and returns to being the hum of a culture that teaches men a narrative where persistence is love. One night, 2 weeks after the park, I came home to find my doormat missing and a new one in its place. The new mat said, "Welcome," in letters that felt like a dare. I threw it away and stood in the hallway shivering at the theatricality of it. People who think of themselves as heroes love props. I installed a second camera. I reported the mat. I went to therapy and said the word betrayal out loud and let it ring in my mouth until it lost its melodrama and felt like what it was, a fact. The confrontation I kept delaying wasn't actually with Evan. It was with the part of me that had softened to every gentle thing he'd done over the years and wanted to use that softness as a reason to let the hard thing go. I sat on the floor and wrote 2 pages by hand, because keyboards make me efficient and script made me honest. I wrote, "He curated my days, and curation is a cousin of control. He told himself he was a curator of my well-being. He was a collector of my choices. Curators ask permission. Collectors take." The words unknotted a place in my chest. I slept well that night for the first time in a month. The next morning, the lawyer called. The protective order had been served. Evan had accepted it quietly, the way he accepts bad news he hopes will reconfigure into something he can fix with diligence. It wouldn't. Not this time. The hook into the fallout was gentle and serious. Power doesn't vanish. It reallocates. Where would mine go now?
Fallout looks like paperwork and lunch with friends and the first run where you forget to look over your shoulder. It looks like learning how to carry the word victim without letting it tint the mirror. It looks like small negotiations with yourself over how much of your life you owe to vigilance and how much to joy. I deleted the decoy accounts and reclaimed my online life. I turned off the camera in my hallway after a month with no incidents. I went to the same coffee shop I used to go to with Evan and sat in the different corner. The barista asked what my friend was. "Different schedules," I said. It felt both cowardly and accurate. She nodded and gave me a free cookie, like she knew something she didn't know. At work, I asked for a raise and got it. I asked for more authority over the way we message patient dignity into the design. I built a team that treats people like narrators of their own health, not subjects of it. The VP in New York emailed once, then didn't again. I chose here, not as default, but as decision. My mother's bills came down in those careful increments that make oxygen feel available. I sent her the spreadsheet, the version I made, not the one made for me, and she sent back 5 heart emojis, even though she hates emojis because sometimes language needs props too. Sometimes at night I still thought I heard my phone buzz when it didn't. Phantom alerts, muscle memory of vigilance. In therapy, we named it. Naming is a kind of leash. I missed Evan like you miss a limb that never belonged to you. Something would happen, a raccoon would tip over a trash can in the alley like a drunk burglar, a headline would use a pun so bad it looped back to genius, and I would turn, reflex ready, to point and laugh with him. I didn't. The absence was clean and sad. Clean was better. After 3 months, the university emailed to say the internal process had ended. They didn't tell me details they couldn't legally tell me. They told me the outcome: restriction from certain systems, mandatory counseling, a formal reprimand in his file, changes in his role that kept him away from the kinds of access he had used. It wasn't exile, it was offense. I didn't decide if it was enough. That wasn't my job. He didn't contact me. That was his one good decision in a year of bad ones. It made the air less heavy. The fallout I didn't expect was a sudden clarity about how I'd let myself be managed by softer hands for years before this. Not just by men, but by the idea that help only counts when you don't have to ask. I started asking more. I told Kara, the real one, when to meet me at the track to make sure I ran. I told my mother when I couldn't talk because I needed quiet. I told my manager when a deadline was impossible and how to make it possible. Each ask was a small lever.
The world moved. The hook into the final turn was quiet. You can write a closing line and still be in the middle of the story of your life. How do you end a chapter without pretending it's the book?
On a Sunday that smelled like wet cedar and bread, I ran Terwilliger at the easy pace that feels like a conversation with legs. The trees did their old, kind thing. My phone stayed silent, a beautiful, boring slate. At the overlook, the city stretched below like a circuit board, millions of private systems humming. I thought about how a person can know your calendar and not know your heart. I thought about how love without consent is just control dressed for dinner. I thought about gifts left like traps, and the way saying no is a skill, like any other. You get better at it with practice. At mile 4, the breath found its place. I smiled, small and real, but kind you don't notice from a distance. I kept running, not away, not toward exactly, just forward, at a pace I chose, on a route I picked, with no one watching but the trees.